right, look, you wrote the hit book. This is a hit book. How Not to Murder Your ADHD Kid. Instead, learn to be your child's own ADHD coach. And I think a lot of people got stuck at the how not to murder and got a bit angry. And realised the key to stopping ADHD adolescents becoming homeless, unemployed, on drugs, and prison was to educate the parents. And if parents could recognise their kids getting into these sorts of issues early on and change their child's life path, that's something we absolutely agree with. Managing their ADHD properly from the start, the end result would mean prison, homeless hospitals, rehabs not packed to the rafters of people with ADHD. And actually, so ADHD New Zealand are taking over this evening to continue this conference. And one of the things they've done is they've really worked with the criminal justice system, with the police service, to the extent that they got the head of the police to stand up and say, like, we are arresting people with ADHD, and it is a healthcare issue that is not being, and it should not be for us, and we shouldn't be arresting them again and again because they've been let down. And I thought that was
well, good on New Zealand, and it's a start. It's time that England started, because we are very, very far behind on that. Our prisons are packed to the rafters with ADHD, absolutely packed.
We know it's a significant issue, and it's something. And you're part of a vocal advocate for change and beliefs. You've got you're on the APBG for ADHD in the House of Parliament, looking to get people's voices heard, particularly in the prison system, as we just discussed, and just obviously without a correct ADHD diagnosis and opportunities for medication and other support, then they can't. It's very, very hard. Campaign to get all offenders assessed for ADHD, especially young offenders. Right.
Do you want me to talk, or are you going to carry on?
I just thought I'd carry on. No, I've got questions now.
I've got quite a lot to say, and I've already had my time cut.
I know, sorry about that.
Justice is kicking in. Yeah.
No, okay, well, we're straight over to you. Yeah. And also, I think Christine, like, when we were messaging, I think you were asked, like, will he speak as fast as I speak? And Christine answered yes.
I speak very fast, and I speak a lot.
Well, either you can talk about whatever you want to say, or I've got these questions, which I don't know if they're...
No, you can throw the questions at me. Throw the questions at me, because they are relevant questions.
Okay, can you tell us a bit why you wrote the book, How Not to Murder Your
I wrote the book for one very good reason, and that is because I'm an ex-prison counsellor, and I've worked in 4 prisons in total, 2 young offender institutes, 4 adult male prisons. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed with ADHD myself in 2015 that I realised why I got on so brilliantly with all these offenders. I've never committed crime myself, apart from speeding fines, but I got on so well with these offenders, including young offenders. And I could never work it out. I thought it was kind of like magic, that I loved them and they loved me. I just didn't know why. And then when I was diagnosed in 2015 with ADHD, I was like, wow, that's why. Because they're all ADHD, and so am I. And I've literally gone back since I was diagnosed, and I've hoiked all those boys that are now out of Aylesbury young offenders and out of Portland young offenders, and I've got them diagnosed on the outside. Not one of them was diagnosed ADHD on the inside. They were all diagnosed on the outside via me and my charity. So I wrote the book because I thought we've got to get further back. We've got to get to the parents before these boys get into trouble. And they get into trouble very early. I say boys, it does include girls actually, but the vast majority are boys. There are girls in prison with ADHD as well. But I thought, if I write a book to educate the parents from when they are teeny tiny, so that they understand these ADHD traits, they understand that ADHD kids think they know best, want everything their own way. Lots of them have got sensory processing disorder, which is why they won't wear certain material. And it's no good forcing them into nylon and crimpling, because they won't wear it. And I just thought the more parents understood their children and were on the same side as them, rather than battling them and trying to change them neurotypical, that way, the kids would grow up being understood and accepted, and they wouldn't have so much to kick against. It's the ones that have got things to kick against that end up in prison. They're kicking against their parents, or they're kicking against the care system, because a lot of them are in there. They're kicking against nans, because a lot of the times nans and granddads bring them up. So I was trying to educate these people that if they only could understand the ADHD brain, like I hadn't understood it for 51 years. I was nearly 52 before I was diagnosed. And I thought, if I can get these parents to understand that these kids, they're not obnoxious and rude and all these things that they get labelled and fidgety and can't sit down and misbehaving and all that. It's not misbehaving, it's actually behaving with your ADHD brain. And I wanted the parents to understand that. So originally when I wrote the book, I wrote it for clients, because I had so many clients. I'm a counsellor, coach, CBT therapist, all of that. And I had clients coming in here from all over the country, literally. And I was saying the same thing to all of them. They were all going, oh, righto, I get it now. Now I understand how his brain works. I'll do things differently. And it was working massively. So I thought, okay, if it's working for these people that I'm seeing one by one, I'll actually write a book. And when I originally wrote it, I thought it would be just parents that would buy it, client parents. And I stuck it on Amazon thinking, well, that'll be ignored and it'll probably cost me money, but it's on there if anybody wants it. And now it's gone bonkers, absolutely bonkers. It's selling all over the country, all over the world. It sells 5 times as much in America as it does in England, which just beggars belief. I can't believe that people are buying my book, my little book that was written near Wickham in Bucks. They're buying it all over America. I find that very hard to believe, because there are so many ADHD books in America. But I think what the difference is, and I'm not bigging myself up here, because I'm no great writer, I'm no great literary person at all. I just wrote as I speak. And I wrote it from my own brain, saying, this is how we think, this is why we do things, this is what a heightened sense of justice is, this is how impulsivity plays out, this is how distraction is, this is why we get bored all the time and we're tearing our hair out with boredom. And rather than fighting those things, accept them. Just accept that that is how the ADHD brain works, and work with it. Don't battle it. And suddenly, because I'm saying this from my brain and I'm not intellectual, I've had a couple of people go, oh, she's not even a psychologist. She's not even a doctor. No, she's not. She's just a very humble counsellor who happens to have severe ADHD herself, moderate to severe. And since my diagnosis, I've gone on to be diagnosed with severe dyspraxia, which is why I practically had a breakdown joining this meeting today, because I can't do links and I can't do things like that. My severe dyspraxia really gets in the way. But I've also got sensory processing disorder, and I've also got, I say dyscalculia, but you're supposed to say dyscalculia, which I find very difficult. So I've got lots of these conditions. So the clients that I've worked with now in private practice, I've worked with a lot of teenagers who've been written off by their schools, absolutely written off. It's SEND kid, ADHD, trouble, autism, And I've worked with a lot of these kids, and I'm very, very passionate about changing their lives, which is why I've now written the second book, because this first book, loads of parents were buying it to give to their kids' teachers, because they were saying, look, this is just a normal person. She's not a doctor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. She's just some woman from Wickham, and she's got ADHD, but she's got it quite severely, and she's lived with it for half a century without it being recognised. And because I speak in just normal people language, and explain all these ADHD traits and where it comes from in the brain and how it feels like to have it, and how we do want to thump people and punch people. I've never thumped anybody or punched anybody in my life, but I've always been accused of having a terrible attitude, because I don't like being talked down to. I've never had bosses. I've been self-employed for 30 years. And once you explain all this to the parents and say, just accept it. Accept that ADHD kids are going to feel that they know best. They do want their own way. They've got a heightened sense of justice. And because it's just kind of me, as I say, this woman from Wickham that's saying this, it kind of talks to the parents who also aren't psychologists, psychiatrists, PhD, masters. They're not. They're like me, with a few CSEs and a couple of O-levels. And because I talk to them on their level, they understand ADHD now. They get it, and they're like, oh, get it. Okay, I get what she's saying. And so this book, they've been giving it in their droves to teachers. For example, one woman in Australia messaged me, she said, I want 5 more of these books to give to my son's 5 teachers. So I've been sending this book off that's very much written for parents, to all these lovely parents who've been giving it to the teachers. And then I had a blinding moment. I'm not very quick with blinding moments because of the severe dyspraxia, but I had a blinding moment, and I thought, oh, actually, stop. There's loads more I can put in that book that will help teachers, because the vast majority of teachers I speak to want to know. They're not trained in it. You've probably covered this in other areas of your talk, but we know, because I run a support group with over 400 members. There's a lot of teachers in that support group. And the most neurodiverse training they've had is 3 hours out of 3 years. So it's not the teacher's fault that they don't know this stuff. And the vast majority of them do want to know it. They want to understand ADHD. They want to know how to best manage these kids and how to get the best out of them. But nobody's told them. Nobody wrote the handbook. So I've written the handbook, and that comes out in November, which is basically another version of this book, but with a lot of extra stuff in to help teachers understand. And also, I'm going to leap straight onto one of the questions you were going to ask me. It goes into details about the comorbidities. I have a big problem with the comorbidities.
It was true. You do talk faster than me. Like
I talk a lot,
and
yes,
even
yeah.
like keep going, which is wonderful, to be honest. Because
well, there was a question about comorbidities, wasn't there? So I'll just leap onto that. It's one of my big bugbears. I failed my 12 plus when I was 12 and ended up going to a very scummy secondary school because I have dyscalculia, which means my brain doesn't work problems out. So I failed, and nobody could understand why I failed. They were like, well, she was in the top half of the class, she should have passed. But I failed spectacularly, in Buck's Education's words. I failed spectacularly because I looked at it and thought, I don't give a toss how many apples he's got, or how many bananas he's got, and how many grapes she's got. My brain didn't work that way. So I failed my 12 plus, ended up at a very, very, and I mean very, rough school where nobody wanted to learn. They all wanted to get pregnant at 13 and leave school. And I didn't. I wanted to learn. But I ended up at the wrong school because of undiagnosed comorbidities. It wasn't my ADHD that made me end up at the wrong school. It was the undiagnosed comorbidities. So now I'm very passionate about this. And what I've worked out is nobody takes responsibility for them. The teachers don't think it's their job. They're certainly not trained in how to do it. The doctors don't even know much about them and certainly don't diagnose them. And paediatricians and psychiatrists won't touch them unless it's things like anxiety, depression, those sorts of things. So we've got all these dyscalculias and dyspraxias and dysgraphias and all these things flying around, and nobody takes responsibility for it. So in my book, I've said, well, I'm sorry, teachers, but it's down to you, because you're the people that are spending 6-7 hours a day with these kids. And it's in school and in classes where the comorbidities are going to show up. So a very quick example, I've got a boy that I'm working with at the moment who's 29. He's been in prison 15 times and nobody has picked up that he's got dysgraphia. Nobody's picked up in the prison service or the schools, and he went to a special education school. Nobody picked up that he can't write, and he's 29, hence he's been in prison 15 times. That is scandalous, scandalous. So in my book, I've done a whole chapter on comorbidities, and I've said to the teachers, I'm very sorry, but it really is down to you, because at the moment, nobody else is taking responsibility for this. The parents don't know enough, and often the parents have got the same comorbidity. So for example, I know my dad, who's not with us anymore, but he had ADHD and he most definitely had dyspraxia. So although I'm a clumsy clot and drop my dinner down my top every single night, so did my dad. So my dad would never have thought that I was anything unusual or had any sort of condition, because he was the same.
It's a very significant issue, though, because it can be real denial where the parent is like, it's not a thing, this is just life. And you're like, actually,
yeah, I've seen it with loads of clients who the kid is, well, I can't spell, but neither can he, but that's a family thing, none of us can spell, and they don't think, oh, that's because we've all got dyslexia or dysgraphia, whatever.
But also not recognizing maybe they've been able to construct a life that that they're satisfied with, that's gone okay, but this world is very different, and their kid may not be able to and needs that help, and it can be, but we also see the opposite. I'm sure you've seen that too, where the kid gets a diagnosis and the parent goes, oh. Oh.
I've had parents massively in denial. I had a headmistress ring me up once and tell me that a child was so ADHD, and the parents were in denial, and that she had told the parents that it was tantamount to abuse. That was her words, the headmistress. Tantamount to abuse not to get this child diagnosed because she was severely ADHD. Irony of ironies, of course. Not only was the child ADHD, so was her younger sister, so was her younger brother, and so were both parents. So both the parents hadn't thought this child, but the headmistress rang me. So I've seen every variation of acceptance and non-acceptance of ADHD. I really have, and internationally. I've had clients from countries where ADHD would be seen as, I quote, a mental sickness. And clients have told me, you cannot tell that child he's got ADHD, because in our country he'll never work again, you know, and that breaks my heart. But it's going on today. Yeah.
Now, just so that people know, so we've slipped on timing, so we're going to start the Heston at about 1:15, but it's coming up shortly, so people know. Go on, I'm going to try and like get an edge in and ask one of the questions. So like,
go for it. I love a question.
What's your experience of working with ADHD offenders in young offender units, prisons?
My experience is wonderful. I adore them all. I didn't want to do my counselling placement in a young offender institute. I wanted to do it in adult male prison, but I was doing the Ponzi person-centred counselling, and the adult male prison I'd worked in before didn't want me, so I had to go to young offenders. And I prejudged like crazy. I was like, oh God, not arsey teenager. I just don't want to work with stroppy teenagers. And then I went and worked with the stroppy teenagers, and I adored every single one of them. And the first prison I worked at when I was on my counselling placement was Aylesbury Young Offenders. I had 6 clients in that first year. 3 of those have been diagnosed ADHD as children, but weren't on medication, hence they'd ended up behind bars. The other 2 of them, I've managed to get diagnosed on the outside. So of my 6 clients, 5 were ADHD. I really don't think number 6 was, but he was very chilled and laid back. Might have been inattentive ADHD, but I don't think so. So 5 out of 6. And very importantly, there's a mental health nurse I know who, she estimates that the amount of ADHD in prisons is 85%. And I think she's probably about right, you know. And there's a very good book that's just come out, written by a social worker who's worked in the prisons, and she says it's about 7 out of 10. So we're all round about that 3/4 mark is ADHD, but the vast majority don't know it.
I've seen other numbers, and I think it's not the debate on the percentages isn't that useful, except to acknowledge.
Only to heighten how wrong this 1 in 4 thing is.
Yeah, it's wildly over the general population, and it's a very significant number. And therefore, like some of the things you're campaigning for, so screening of within the prison service of offenders, it makes sense. Yes, you know, I absolutely agree. Like it makes sense to screen, to help people. Like why wouldn't you? If the aim is rehabilitation, why wouldn't you?
And why wouldn't you clear the prisons of at least half, if not 75% of the population? They need to stop building prisons. This building prison thing is a total waste of time. Instead of that, they need to actually test the people that they've got in there for ADHD and clear half of them out. That would help, and it would save the government an awful lot of money if they did that, and it would also protect the public. This is what they forget. These boys who are not diagnosed and not medicated, they're out there pilfering and mugging and robbing and thieving and all that. That's what they do. Diagnose them, medicate them. Everybody's safe. And
I've spoken to people who've come out of school not being able to read or write. Like they're completely failed by the education system. I've talked to people on both sides of this, where you've had people go into criminality because they felt they had no other choice. I've seen people, though,
absolutely
lock them, stay at home. They drop their current friend group. They realised what was going to happen, and in that case, they actually learned to read or write. They started watching soap operas. They wanted to know what was happening, and they started reading. And so they decided to get the TV guides to read what was going to happen. And through that, they learned to read or write. And they now have a very responsible, significant job. And I know people who've gone into criminality and then come out. Like it's the complete destruction of people's options by the failure of the school system is so massive. Significant. And
also then the failure of the young offender places, because in the young offender institutes, because the government have cut the amount of officers on, boys, their education classes get cut. I had one boy who's now out and working on a building site and very successful. He was livid nearly every week I went to see him because bricks, as he called it, which was building, was cancelled. They kept cancelling. So the boys that are in there who want to study and want to learn and want to get a trade, often, not always, but often, they are hampered by the fact that the government have cut the amount of officers on wings so much that as soon as you've got one officer who goes off sick, most wings now have got 3 officers. So one goes sick, bang, that's it, lock up. Nobody can come out for anything, for education, gym, nothing. So in the young offender institutes, the ones that work is where they get them doing the training, where they get them on the mechanics and on the cars and actually getting a trade before they come out. That's what needs to happen. They all need to be in full-time education in the young offender institutes and come out with a trade. That's what needs to happen. It's not hard.
We are in absolute agreement. It's
good.
It's like
it
is.
It's just we're making it happen. We've got the police on side as well.
And
what
you're doing is brilliant. And I think also your resonance with people, like the way you communicate, the way you engage with people, which is very, like, if we can very kindly say, it's very different from the more sort of academic
down to earth
stage,
down to earth
approach. Like, and it's but it's an important and wonderful thing. And if we're going to help people, we have to provide help in different ways. And you're a shining light of that, and it's a big deal. We've got time for one last question, then we've got to go and run. I get to pick. So hey. Actually, sorry, I'm going to do another one after two. The best advice you would give the parents of ADHD children who are worried about what they might go down the wrong path. But you have to do it quite quickly because I want to edge in.
I'll do it very quickly. Be on their side, simply. Be on their side. Don't take up an opposing stance. Try and understand the ADHD. Get them in with a coach or a counsellor or somebody who understands ADHD. Help them understand their brain. That's the critical thing. If these kids, girls and boys, understand their brains, understand what impulsivity is and how that might get them into trouble, understand what not thinking of the consequences is and how that might get them into trouble. I've worked with loads of teenagers and I've rammed it into their brains. You've got to think of the consequence because your brain doesn't do it naturally for you. But if the parents are on their side, then they won't end up going down the wrong path. It's parents who take up an oppositional stance where it all goes wrong.
No, thank you. And that's a really important insight. Thank you. And for people watching who come, particularly want to hear for the Heston, it's going to be starting in a few minutes. So we're on our last question here, and we've overrun slightly. And to be honest, look, we're an ADHD meeting.
Heston's only down the road. I might nip up his restaurant after. He's literally down the road from me.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It's
question. Cut me a question.
Tangented me, and I've gone like, woof.
Cut me a question.
Yeah. So the question I've got, so it's my favourite, and it's one I try and ask everyone. So in your life so far, the impact of ADHD. What impact of ADHD has made you happiest, and what impact of ADHD has made you saddest? If we do saddest first, and then end on happiest.
Saddest, that the school thing, the fact that I didn't go to a decent grammar school, I didn't do A levels, I didn't go to drama school. I was seen, I went 23, by RADA, and they wanted me to go there, and I couldn't because I'd already got a mortgage and bought a flat. So I think my education is the saddest thing about my ADHD / comorbidities. That was the saddest thing. The happiest thing is that I can help loads of people. I've always been passionate about helping people. I started off as a counsellor on my own when I was fully qualified in 2015. Now there's 80 of us who work for Head Staff. We're all diagnosed ADHD. We're all passionate about helping people. And I won't take on counsellors who don't care, All our counsellors care about people. And that's what I love most about my ADHD. I massively care about people. And I will bend over backwards to help an ex-offender change their life. I'll bend over backwards to help kids change their lives. And I've got my 3 favourite private clients. They've all been arrested, all of them. One's now training to be a doctor in his 4th year. One's in his 3rd year of training to be a professional footballer. And one's gone to university to study law, to be a lawyer, to help ADHD people. They were 3 of my clients, all of whom had been arrested for several things when I first had them. And all of them, I said, sod that, we'll move on from that. What do you really want to do? And let's fight and keep fighting and pushing to get where you want to be. And all 3 of them have. And I'm proud as punch. And that's my favourite thing about ADHD, is that I care a lot.
That is, and those achievements of those people are that's just wonderful, wonderful. And it is the point that we're trying to push so hard, right? Which is that people with ADHD can thrive. They can be amazing. But, if they are lost, if they're not provided with support, that understanding, that awareness of their ADHD, of how to succeed, then they're completely can be completely
It
curtailed.
can go so easily wrong. Yeah, it can go so easily wrong. And that's why we're massively passionate about raising awareness, because the more people know, the more people understand, the less likely they're going to go down those addiction, crimey paths and end up in young offender institutes. That's I would love every young offender institute in this country to shut. That would be my goal. Don't put them in young offender institutes.
It's absolutely.
Yeah,
right,
work with them to achieve on the outside.
You've been wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thanks for
pleasure
allowing us to change the time on you, and for being part of this. It's a big deal. Obviously, this is a global ADHD conference, bringing together people from 55 different countries and looking to change ADHD globally, nationally, locally, personally.
Which is great. I applaud you. Well done for doing it, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for your support and for
great pleasure.
All you're doing. So. But that is the time we have to say adieu. So, bye and thank you so very, very much.
Lovely to meet you, and good luck with all of the rest of the time.
Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
Goodbye and thank you. She's wonderful, an extraordinary person doing extraordinary things and communicating in a way that's working for so many people. And it's a really, really important work.